Hey everyone, welcome to our second video lecture. Today we'll be talking about using mathematical models in ecology. Specifically, we'll be talking about the case study of lead poisoning of Laysan albatrosses at Midway Atoll, using ecological models to cause conservation action. So today our two main objectives are learning how to use structured population models, sometimes known as matrix population models, to assess and protect populations. Our secondary goal is that I really want you to come to understand the importance and the uses of mathematical models in ecology and conservation. So we'll start with an introduction to the case study, Laysan albatrosses at Midway Atoll. Then we'll talk about mathematical models in general, and then we'll get more specific and talk about structured population models, their assumptions, their mathematical structure, and then we'll apply the mathematical model to the case study of the albatrosses at Midway. So, we'll start with talking about the case study. This is the fun part. Okay, so this research that I'll be talking about today is based on research by Myra Finkelstein. It was her PhD research in microbial and environmental toxicology at UCSC. She's now an environmental toxicology researcher at UCSC. And these are the two publications it's based on. One was Lead Poisoning of Seabirds, Environmental Risks from Leaded Paint at a Decommissioned Military Base. And then the main one we'll be talking about is about assessing demographic risk factors and management priorities in the species. Okay, so there are three main albatrosses that occur in the North Pacific Ocean, but the one we'll be focusing on is the Laysan albatross. And it is considered near threatened by the IUCN, as you can see here. And here are some of the main threats to albatross populations. First, there's long-line fishing bycatch. So when fishermen try to catch tuna or other fish by putting out these long lines with hooks and bait on the bottom. Often when they're dropping the lines, they're not just getting fish, whatever they're trying to catch, but birds also dive for the bait, and when this bait sinks, they end up drowning. They also have to deal with the effects of introduced mammals, particularly for colonies that are in populated areas like in Kauai and Oahu. Not so much on Midway. They also have to deal with marine debris. These birds are adapted to go out and just scoop up whatever food is on the top of the ocean. And these days, a lot of that's plastic. So this is actually a pretty common sight at Midway. We often see dead chicks, and then when their bodies have decomposed enough to see what's inside their stomachs, you see just tons of plastic like this. It's really sad. Nobody's been able to quantify yet exactly how much it contributes, exactly how many birds die this way, or that the plastic is actually causing them to die. But it certainly must contribute to birds dying of dehydration and starvation because they don't have room for food in their stomachs once they're full of this plastic. And lastly, we'll be talking about lead poisoning. Okay. So, Midway is in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. You probably know about the main Hawaiian Islands down here, Big Island, Maui, Oahu, Kauai, as well as a few others. But up here, there's all these other islands and atolls and reefs as well, where nobody really lives full-time, except when they're working there. And these are all now part of the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. And they're all really heavily protected. You may also know about Midway because it was the site of a World War II battle and was a military base throughout World War II and the Cold War. So here's what Midway looked like when it was bombed. I don't know if this was Pearl Harbor Day, the day Pearl Harbor was attacked, December 7th, 1941. Or if this was during the Battle of Midway, which was June 4th to 6th, 1942. But anyway, you can see the seaplane hangar here getting bombed. And then you can see this little albatross in there wondering what on earth is going on. Couple of them out there. Midway is now very important as a emergency runway for planes flying over the Pacific. So there have been a couple of large airline planes that have had to do emergency landings at Midway in the last couple of years. So Midway is an atoll, which means that it was formed when a volcano was moved away from the hot spot. So it was no longer active, and it sank beneath its own weight, but the coral grew up around it. And so this is coral, or this was formed by coral, if it's not still alive, all the way around. Midway's not a complete atoll. And there's 3 islands. This is the main island, where the runway is that we use these days and where people live. Not full-time, only if they're working there. And then 2 other little islands. So Midway has often been in the news, as well as for emergency planes, for having the world's oldest known wild bird. And her name is Wisdom. This is a picture of her this year with her chick. She's thought to be at least 63 years old and to have raised at least 30 chicks, because she was banded about 1956 and she was already having chicks at that point. So she's a pretty old bird, and you should definitely check her out on Facebook and see what's going on at Midway. Okay, so the problem we're going to be talking about with the albatrosses at Midway is called droop wing syndrome. And this is when the birds are not able, the chicks especially, are not able to hold their wings up. Their wings are drooping. And the medical term for this is peripheral neuropathy. It's one of your peripheral nerves, which go from the spinal cord out to the rest of the body, isn't working properly for some reason. And this could be for a variety of reasons. It could be due to trauma, it could be due to poisoning, all kinds of different things. So, as I mentioned, Midway was a military base throughout World War II and the Cold War, so from the 1940s up until the mid-1990s. And there's a lot of lead around for various reasons. Munitions, lead peanut buildings, lead in the soil, all kinds of different things. And researchers back in around 1990 realized that there was this problem with the droop wing syndrome, and they attributed it to lead poisoning. But they weren't sure where the lead was coming from. So it's a military base, there's lots of sources of lead, and so we need evidence to link the source with the actual poisoning so that managers can actually do something about it. So the first step was to really quantify just how much lead poisoning there was and look at it in different places. So the first thing that Myra did when she got out to Midway was she measured the lead in the blood of albatross chicks near the buildings and away from the buildings. And as you can see here, the median lead in the blood of albatrosses near the buildings was much higher than away from the buildings. So this is suggesting that it probably is due to something from the buildings that is causing this lead exposure. And also, it was only birds that were near the buildings that had enough lead in their blood to be demonstrating droop wing or other symptoms of lead poisoning. In fact, about more than 80% of the chicks near the buildings had high enough lead levels that they could be exhibiting drooping or other symptoms. Now the next thing was to figure out, well, where is this lead coming from? It's probably something to do with the buildings, but what exactly? And the way Myra did this was using something called isotope analysis. So isotopes are different variants or forms of chemical elements that have different numbers of neutrons. For example, hydrogen always has 1 proton, but it can have 1, 2, or 3 neutrons. Sorry, 0, 1, or 2 neutrons. And so these are 3 different isotopes. If they're not radioactive, then they're called stable isotopes, which is what was used in this study. So lead exists as 4 different isotopes, so 4 different numbers of neutrons, but all with the same number of protons, which is what would define it as the element lead. So the lead isotope ratios in the organism reflect the lead isotope ratio in the exposure source. We also use isotopes for figuring out what animals are eating, where they've been living, all kinds of different things. It's a really useful technique. And so she was able to collect lead from the blood of chicks and figure out its lead isotope ratio, and collect lead from the nest soil to figure out its isotope ratio, to determine if the isotope ratios were close enough that the chicks were probably getting lead from the soil in their nests. So as you can see here, there is a relationship. R squared of 0.36 near the buildings, 0.224 away from the buildings. Neither one has a p-value of less than 0.05, so it's not significant. So let's see if we can find something else that works better. So that seems like it's not too likely that the nest soil is the source of the poisoning. So she went on to look at peanut chips that were located near the nest, and found that here there was a much stronger relationship. And R squared of 0.8853 means that 85% of the variation in the lead isotope ratio in the chick blood was due to variation in the nest peanut chips lead isotope ratio. Very strong relationship, and the p-value is 0.003, so very significant. So the lead-based paint must be the source of the poisoning. So the next thing is, Myra needed to show that this lead poisoning is actually affecting the population. Because if one of those other sources of mortality to albatrosses is much more important, then this lead poisoning might not matter at all. So why should managers spend millions and millions of dollars to stop this lead poisoning if it doesn't matter to the population at all? And indeed, the main thought among seabird biologists is that the main cause of mortality to albatrosses was this long-line fishing causing drowning. So that's why she started a mathematical model to show what the actual population consequences were of lead poisoning. And that's where this paper comes in. Okay, now let's start video number 2.